preserving and that they really are secure and what have you. And it's we can't take the easy way out and say, well, if we just leave out a little bit of privacy, everything else works. We have to take seriously the hard problem. So if we're going to succeed, the system needs to work for all parties at the same time. It doesn't have to be perfect for all parties at the same time. It just has to add more value than it destroys for all parties at the same time. The system needs to respect all the NSTIC principles at the same time, right? We don't want to have a privacy-preserving NSTIC and a separate secure NSTIC and a separate usable NSTIC. It's got to be all of them at the same time. And so just, as the final word of caution, not everything that works today in a closed ecosystem will work tomorrow in an open ecosystem, and we need to be aware of that. So task 2 for today, the second thing that you're going to do, and Kay is going to come up here in a minute and she's going to talk about a little worksheet that she's going to hand out to capture the results of the 2 tasks, is at some point in the next 9 months, we hope to issue 2 press releases describing our first accomplishments. And they need to be things our core constituents care about. And by the way, our core constituents, don't make any mistake about this, are citizens and relying parties. If they don't come to the party, it doesn't matter what we build. Citizens and relying parties don't care very much about standards, and they don't care very much about policies, and they don't care very much about accreditation. They do care about simplifying their lives, better privacy, lower identity theft risk, and some of them care about making money. So here's the task for today. Write a 1-paragraph press release you'd be excited to read describing one problem IDESG will have been able to solve for citizens within 9 months. And then write another 1-paragraph press release you'd be excited to read describing one problem IDESG will have been able to solve for relying parties within 9 months. If we get those 2 things and start to work on them and actually get to the point where we can issue those press releases, I think the White House will be able to claim that we have been a success, and I think we will be able to attract people to come and work on finishing the rest of the ecosystem, which is going to take a lot longer than 9 months. So just a couple of background questions to leave you with to think about at your table. So here's the identity ecosystem. It's got providers, it's got actors, it's got consumers, and it's got third parties like the law enforcement and advertisers. So one of the things that you might consider in doing the first task, what are we building, what do we need, is what can each of these parties do, what can they see, what do they give, and what do they get? And the other thing to think about is for each of these parties, what does it cost to participate in the ecosystem, and what benefit do they get out of participation in the ecosystem? So that's today. I got one more slide, and then I'm going to bring Brett up here to give his perspective, and that is what about tomorrow and Thursday? So tomorrow, brief overview, 2 objectives again. First is to enumerate use cases which we will need to solve, and the second is to use the results of today's discussions and of the use case discussions to start drafting some work plans for the committees. And then Thursday, we got 2 objectives again. You're sensing a pattern. Objective 1 is to take up the results of Wednesday's discussions and identify overlaps and gaps in committee work plans. And objective 2 is our little homeopathic dose of procedural work, just in case anybody was going to go into withdrawal, to discuss and approve the Ombudsman's complaint procedure and the committee charters that have been submitted. So I guess do I have 2 minutes left, Brett? I can apparently take them. So is there anybody who'd like to ask a question or make a comment about what I just said, either online or in the room? There's an online question. Can someone read it to me? I can't see it.
What is the IDESG doing with regard to outreach and marketing of IDESG? Most citizens have not heard about it.
Okay, so the question is, what is IDESG doing about outreach and marketing? And I guess if I could call Peter Brown up for a moment to give us a brief readout on that, and then I think after that we'll defer other questions till the session later in the afternoon, and we'll have Brett come up and give us his thoughts. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome, Bob. So my name is Peter Brown. I'm the interim chair of the Communications and Outreach Committee, so it seemed to fall to me, if anybody, to answer the question. I think the very blunt answer is nothing yet. But that's a bit pat. What we've recognized is that there is There is a lot of people we need to reach out to, but also there's a lot of work still to be done internally amongst members who have signed up and who are not here either in person or online. I mean, we're talking about something 1,100, 1,200 people in total. And although the participation at this face-to-face meeting is very high and very encouraging, there are still a lot of people who have sort of signed up because they think it's interesting but are still hesitating to get engaged. So we've got to find an engagement model for those as well. I think there are a couple of things to answer directly the question, which will be of interest. Tomorrow, both as part of the formal meeting that we have of the Communications and Outreach Committee, and hopefully at lunchtime in one of the Birds of the Feather sessions, we're going to be looking explicitly at two issues related to here. One is look at a study that has been undertaken by Deloitte on behalf of the National Programme Office to look at a group, I think it's something like about 700 different target groups that we are looking towards as people who ought to be here that are not, and to actually try and get a sense of where we think the priorities lie in terms of bringing these people and engaging them into the organisation. And the second one, which has been the subject of quite a widespread sort of to and fro on different mailing lists, was how do we engage? You know, we use surveys, do we have questionnaires, do we have some methods that we could use to engage those people? So one of the other parts of the session of the committee tomorrow is going to try to address that, to say, well, okay, we've identified the groups we want to go for and that we think that we want to engage. How do we actually do it? What are the tool sets we have available through surveys, questionnaires and other means to be able to actually engage with those people? So those are the first two steps concretely to address those things. Thanks, Bob.
Hello, everyone. Well, that didn't. So I have a clicker, but I'll need someone to load the next presentation, and then I'll start clicking through it. My name is Brett McDowell. I am the chair of the Management Council, and when I am not volunteering my time for IDESG, I lead the ecosystem security team at PayPal. I wanted to make a few reminders. Where we are in our journey is that this is the first real working meeting. I think both Jeremy and Bob touched on this. I want to reinforce it. We have met twice before, and what we were doing is organizational building, defining governance, putting things in place, and getting buy-in on those rules of collaboration so that now we can work and debate and make decisions and create the framework together. The intellectual property policy, even if you've not yet signed the membership agreement, I just want to reinforce, they're going to make copies available out there on the desk. They're going to put a link to it as a reminder for those in the chat room. And this meeting is covered under that intellectual property policy. And by being here and participating, you agree to those terms. So that's another reminder. Very good. So the slides are back up. So what I'm going to do is talk about our goals in developing our work plan. So why should the Management Council develop goals in a work plan in an organization like this? Well, the main reason is the rules of association tell us that we have to. That we will be providing guidance to the plenary on the broad objectives and the produced work plans to prioritize work items. And you are going to be doing the work that our decisions are based on here in the plenary next few hours and over the next 2 days. And if we don't measure it, we shouldn't expect to get it done. So we're going to hold ourselves and each other accountable to metrics and objectives that we define. But what are we going to base this on? We are not starting our journey today. Even though this is the first working meeting of the IDESG, this is not the first working session of NSTIC. NSTIC has been in development for many years. And so I'm going to just do a quick set of reminders of where we are, because we're standing on the shoulders of giants here and we're taking it across the finish line. They're the origins of NSTIC. I'm going to refer to some of the goals and visions that are set out there. Obviously the goals in NSTIC itself. Then there's the pre-IDESG proposals that came out of the National Program Office. And then, of course, there's the work that you have done on charters where you've identified the deliverables. And then there is going to be the deliberation this week that we'll base our 2013 and 2014 goals on. So from the Cybersecurity Policy Review of 2009, here are some takeaways. So a near-term action plan to build a cybersecurity-based identity management vision and strategy that addresses privacy and civil liberties interests, leveraging privacy-enhancing technologies for the nation. And implement a high-value activity, whether it's smart grid or other examples. I'm sure all of you have your vertical market interests of what a high-value activity is, as an opt-in for interoperable identity management systems to build trust for online transactions and to enhance privacy. So I'm going through this as a reminder of where we came from so that we're all leaning towards defining the objectives that we're going to measure ourselves against in this first year. Then CSIS came out with a follow-up 2 years later. And this is one of the takeaways that I wanted to refresh our memories of. The biggest challenge for the NSTIC and its new NPO will be to increase incentives for people to use online authentication. And of course here they're talking about beyond password, right? Strong authentication is really the reference here. And yes, that is a big challenge, and we need to stay focused on that incentive. And then of course the NSTIC vision and principles themselves. I'm not going to read through every slide. I am going to hit on some of these key points. You're getting it reinforced. You've heard it from Bob. You've heard it from Jeremy if you were in this morning's session. We will keep coming back and we will be tenacious about holding ourselves to the 4 guiding principles. Privacy enhancing and voluntary, secure and resilient, interoperable, cost effective and easy to use. Now think about it. What business does this organization have of dealing with cost effective? Well, I'm saying that it is part of our strategy, it's part of our mission, and it is on our plate to address. So think about that when you're developing your objectives. So then we have the goals as laid out in NSTIC themselves. So I'm only going to hit the high level. These slides are also going to be available for you to noodle on. And as you come up with ideas of what you want the major achievements to be when you're writing your headlines, you'll be able to find these. In fact, I want confirmation from someone back there, maybe Laura, that these slides will be available during the tabletop exercise. Could we get the slides up? Okay, thank you, Laura. So develop comprehensive identity ecosystem framework, of course. That's what we've been always talking about. Build and implement the ecosystem. We have to take on responsibility beyond writing down the rules. A lot of organizations have formed, written rules, and left it to someone else to implement. There are government deployment responsibilities here, private sector deployment responsibilities. That's the implementation piece. And we have to think about, again, incentives and how we're going to ensure this happens. It's part of our strategic responsibility. Enhance confidence and willingness to participate in the identity ecosystem. Again, awareness and campaigning to the broader consumer base. What kind of public awareness campaign are we going to have to drive that? And again, tied back to what incentives are we going to come up with. And ensure the long-term success and sustainability of the identity ecosystem. That's going to start this year by coming up with a sustainable model for this organization. That's a near-term deliverable from the Management Council. We have to have a business plan that's going to support this organization well before we are anywhere near running out of funding from the grant. And this part, I really want to focus on this because you don't see this presented quite often when you hear people talk about NSTIC. This is in the strategy itself. These are the, I think it's 3 to 5 year benchmarks. Anyway, they're the benchmarks that now map to 2014 to 2016. This is what we're going to really focus on in the Management Council discussion for setting our goals appropriately. We need objectives that we can hold ourselves to, know that we're making progress against, that are going to result in these outcomes. So people and non-person entities have the ability to choose trusted digital identities for a variety of uses and at multiple levels of assurance. These things are in there. That multiple levels of assurance is important. We're not going to just have some identity providers and big relying parties at a level of assurance 1 and say we're done. You know, we're also not going to have, just recognize government contractors at assurance level 4 and say we're done. Well, we'll need to look at multiple levels of assurance. Then this is number 2. So we're going to see a growing marketplace. And the other thing I like about this benchmark is it's not just a growing marketplace of participants, of credentials, but also of the transaction volume over those credentials. So that is a key. I remember an anecdote. I think it was the very first Identity Commons workshop. It wasn't even Identity Commons. It was the Internet Identity Workshop, the first one I attended. It was a long, long time ago. And I was presenting on Federation, and someone challenged me from the back of the room, who later was a big contributor to the OpenID protocol, about, but what's the transaction volume? And that always stuck with me because we had all these other metrics, but we weren't measuring the transaction volume. And it's a key KPI for us to hold ourselves accountable for here. Another key benchmark that we need to stay focused on is attribute providers. So we need to explicitly look at the attribute provider marketplace, not just the traditional credentials and relying parties, but also the verification of attributes. You know, those great use cases we've been talking about for so long where a relying party just asks a question, yes or no. The attribute provider is able to say, well, I know their real age, so I will say yes or no. Right? Minimum disclosure supporting use cases, as well as identity verification when you're trying to enroll a new account, not just between an account that's already been created and an existing relying party. So we need to stay focused on the attribute providers. And here's the transaction. Oh, maybe I talked about the transaction one before I was on the slide. And the next, building upon FICAM. So this is core to NSTIC itself. It reinforces that we're not here to reinvent FICAM, but we're building on FICAM. And we also need to work with our government participants. There are several government agencies that are members of this outfit, and that is a good thing. We want a multiplicity of agencies involved because we need to count on them, like any other relying party, to align with our framework and deploy trust-marked identity services in the federal government. And then this is perhaps the daunting slide. This is the we need to land on the moon in 10 years slide. And it is the 10-year vision for NSTIC. That basically all of the building has been done, the policies, the processes, the tools, the technologies, and they continue to evolve. Right? Thank goodness the authors understood the idea of evolution, and that it will never truly be done. But we have built all of the initial pieces, and we have a process to keep them evolving and innovating. Another is the majority of relying parties are choosing to be part of the identity ecosystem. Think about that. That is a humbling goal. What do you mean the majority of relying parties? The majority of relying parties who have raised their hand? Or are you talking about looking at maybe the Fortune 1000, and you've got the majority of the Fortune 1000 relying parties participating in the ecosystem? So we need to set appropriate goals here. Majority of U.S. internet users regularly engaging in transactions over this ecosystem, majority of online transactions occurring over the ecosystem, and a sustainable market exists for all the players in the ecosystem. So that's the end game. That's the 10-year vision that we are embarking on in the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group. Now, in addition to that, we have the NPO work. So after NSTIC came out, then the National Program Office was formed, and they started issuing discussion drafts, and they started holding briefings and workshops. And some of the things that they proposed, I went back and reviewed them and mapped them to where we stand today, and there isn't a big disconnect. I think a lot of folks that came to that first Chicago meeting saw this long list of things that were supposed to happen on day one, literally day one, in their discussion draft work plan, and thought that there was a huge disconnect between some of us and those proposals. Well, if you look at when they wanted to see the work streams conclude, we're actually on target, even though we decided to take several months to kind of reaffirm and, as Jeremy put it, perfect the governance model. We're actually still largely in line with their initial hope for our timeline. so that we would establish the steering group infrastructure by Q1 2013. Those are things like we have ratified the rules of association, we have the intellectual property policy, we have a membership agreement, and soon we will be having our first full-term election. The next work stream, develop identity ecosystem framework. Again, they targeted that as 12 plus months, so not sooner than Q4 2013. So we can agree to not sooner then, but how close are we going to get? So we're going to have to get tight on what this is in the Management Council. Develop the Identity Ecosystem Accreditation Program. Again, we're looking at probably a serious milestone here by the end of the year, but more like Q1 of 2014 is where we can start saying how far can we get that accreditation program. And what's it going to look like? Are we going to be pointing to existing certification programs and saying, well, we've reviewed, we've done the analysis of your framework, it's passed approval, so you now are identity ecosystem certified. But to Bob's point earlier this morning, we can't just connect existing silos. We have to go beyond that, but we also need to look at a tiered, phased approach. So some of this is going to be identifying things we can immediately accredit and certify, and some of this is going to be new requirements. And establish the business model, and we talked about that before. So today, where are we in developing the organization's work plan? In this quarter, we will complete, my commitment on behalf of the Management Council is we will have a work plan with specific measurable goals, SMART goals. And this is how we're going to get there. So we have all the vision and purpose and mission that I've just reviewed, in addition to the work you've done since we formed IDESG in drafting all these charters. These are the 12 charters currently listed up on the public website. And you have deliverables in there. You have objectives in there. You have processes defined. So that's all going into this. Step 2 are the deliberations you're going to begin with a tabletop exercise in just a few minutes. And you're going to set the priorities. You're going to write those press releases. And you are going to provide some consensus, I believe, by the end of tomorrow, actually by midway on Thursday, excuse me, and the Management Council will meet Thursday afternoon, and we will take all of that as our starting point. And we won't probably conclude on the goals and objectives on Thursday, but we will by the end of Q1. So the final thought, as you brainstorm and you engage in this tabletop exercise, just remember some of the principles of setting SMART goals. We want to be very specific about the outcome. There's a lot of generality. We have years of generalities in the cybersecurity policy review, in NSTIC itself. It's time for us to get very specific about the output of this organization in measurable ways that are attainable but also aspirational, relevant to the NSTIC itself, and timely. From the Management Council perspective, I think it's very important that we identify our wins before the grant runs out, and we identify our wins after we're self-sustaining. We have to understand the value proposition to those that we'll turn to either through membership fees or certification fees in order to provide the revenues to make this organization self-sustaining. And with that, I'm going to bring up Kay, or is Bob? Okay, so Bob's going to come back up and talk about this next tabletop exercise. Thank you.
So real quickly, I am going to introduce Kay to give you the details. So remember, there are 2 tasks today. The first is to put together a list of the elements that are going to need to be in the identity ecosystem framework, and that is both in Word form and in picture form. And I direct your attention to the walls behind you, for those of you here in the room. So the Holistic Pictures Subcommittee of the Management Council has already been doing a lot of work collecting existing pictures of identity ecosystems and proposals for identity ecosystems and ideas for how they might work. So I encourage you to take a look at those. as you begin your group deliberations. And then, of course, the second task is the creation of the press releases for the two quick hits that we're going to be talking about. So thanks, by the way, to Kalia and the Holistic Pictures Subcommittee. Kalia, those are also available online, right, on the IDESG website. And so Laura Barman in the back, if we could post the link to the Holistic Pictures Subcommittee pictures in the chat room in a minute or two so that the online participants will have access to those. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kay Shepard-Cohen from the Secretariat, who will explain to you the methodology for completing the two tasks that we've got this afternoon, and then we'll come back together to discuss the results this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob and Brett. Okay, in this next portion of the afternoon, what we'd really like to do is begin to ask all of you to engage in a discussion together. For those of you who are here in person, we're going to ask you to work at your table together as a group. And in a moment here, Laura's going to post the form that we're going to ask you to complete. For those of you who are online and listening in, we've created these virtual rooms, if you will, virtual table discussions for you. You can go ahead and log into any of those, call in, and there's a Join Me page. And we're going to be asking you to complete the same form. What we've done is we've listed kind of a straw man, if you will, thanks to a lot of hard work by the MPO, of some of the potential components for the identity ecosystem framework. And in this form, as you can see, posted here on the screen, what we're going to ask you to do as a table is to give us your sense of what's the priority of each of these. And after you run through about a dozen or so of these that we've kind of put together, then we've got space at the bottom of the form for you as a table to say, well, you know what, this is a nice start, but this isn't everything. And so other ideas that you have for things that are missing, for things that need to be additional components of the framework, there's space at the bottom for you to go ahead and identify those. This form is posted online. We're going to ask you, and I see most of the tables here have a laptop, to complete one form as a table with your agreed upon priority setting and your agreed upon additional information that you want to post. If you submit that one form, then we should be able to quickly tally everyone's input to get a good read and good feedback from both the folks who are here and the other 200 or so people who are also participating remotely. I can't tell, Laura, is that web link posted somewhere? It'll be on the screen here, okay, in a moment. And I think for those folks remote, when you go and find the information about the rooms to sign in, you'll also see that highlighted there is a link to an online form that does the same thing. So that's what we'll be doing between now and the break. Did you have some more things? Okay.
And in terms of the pictures and the lists of detailed elements to go into the various pieces of the ecosystem framework, you can use paper or you can use electronic means to create those pictures and lists. And if you do use paper, make sure that we're able to collect them in some fashion at the end of the exercise. Okay, so what's our schedule? When do we start and when do we stop? Okay, so we have an hour to discuss these items in the groups, and we will then come back up and convene as a body. So, Kalia, you asked a question, what's the deliverable? So, I'll come to your table. If you have a question, call me to your table.